Me and welcome to this webinar about learning analytics and whether it's the future of teaching and what it actually means. And we have a lot of interesting things I want to discuss with you today. But before that, there's an address on screen for a WhatsApp group which you can use to ask questions during the presentation. And if you're having any problems connecting to the presentation or you're not hearing the sound or anything like that, just uh, and so I think we can start. And so let's start with a brief introduction. My name is Erkki Kaila. I'm a university lecturer at the University of Helsinki in Finland, and I'm also the head of research in Edugen. And you can use the email address over there to reach me if you have any questions, whether it's about the presentation or whether it's about anything else, or if you're interested in research collaboration or anything like that. I'm more than happy to answer whatever questions you may have. But enough about me. Let's start with the fact that, well, I'm from Finland, Edugen is from Finland, and so I'm bringing you greetings from Finland. The winter is coming. It doesn't actually look like that yet, so it's don't really have snow, but it's going to be a week or two, maybe a month or two, and then it's going to be full winter. And there are a bunch of things Finland is known about over there, things we are proud of, like the beautiful sceneries and Santa Claus, which, as you hopefully all know, who is from Finland. But one of the things we are really proud of is our education and equality of education and the possibility to provide an equal chances of education to everyone in the whole country. So anyone in Finland, regardless of their family background and regardless of their income or anything like that, can get the best possible education. It's all based on people's skills and what they want to do, and that's what we're really proud of, and that's really the part of the, or one of the important reasons why we're having these seminars as well. We want to share all the things we've gotten from Finland. So let's start with the basics. Let's start on how we define learning analytics, what we mean by learning analytics. And there's a formal definition I like to start with, and this is from the first international conference about learning analytics and knowledge. And they came up with this sort of official definition of what we mean by learning analytics. And I think there are some important keywords which I've highlighted in the definition. Learning analytics is about collecting, analyzing, and reporting data, like any data analytics. But the specific thing about learning analytics is that the data is about learning. And the official definition states that it's about learners, but it doesn't necessarily need to be about learners. It can be about teachers or other stakeholders as well. That's what I want to talk about more later today. But it's about data about learning, and the idea of learning analytics, like again any analytics, is understand what's happening better. So that's what we're trying to gain. We're doing analytics because we want to understand something better. And a special thing about learning analytics is, of course, that because we're collecting data from learning situations and we're analyzing that data and we want to understand what happens there, is what happens after that. So once we understand what's going on, we can then maybe react and we can try to make things better based on the data. And I mentioned stakeholders before. Now there are three important groups of stakeholders in learning analytics, visualized in here. First of all, we have the students, and then we have the teachers, and finally we have the administration, whether it's like school principals or school owners or anyone running the education. And the fourth stakeholder, which is not visualized in this image but which is still important, are the parents, especially when we're talking about younger students, of course. But I think these are the three main groups. And all the groups have set goals if we talk about learning analytics. And I think one shared goal is that everyone wants to improve the education. Everyone wants to improve learning, to be specific. So, and want to improve the learning performance So basically, we want to have better grades, and we want to have more people passing the courses, and we want to, in general, improve the level of learning. And this is important for students, and it's important for teachers, and it's important for school administration. Other goals different stakeholders might be having is, of course, improving student motivation and well-being. And for teachers, the early detection of problems is important. It's also important for students because that enables, again, fixing things when there's something to fix. And for teachers, I think something that's not probably mentioned enough usually is the better understanding of own learning process, and or better understanding of students' learning process, and better understanding of own teaching process. So seeing what things are working well and what things might not be working as well. And for administration, the data-driven decision making is of course important, so that when you're making decisions, you can actually base those decisions on what's happening in the classrooms. So you're fixing the right problems and not the ones that might not need fixing. So different stakeholders, different goals. And because we're talking about analytics, and we're talking about data analytics and learning analytics, to be specific, we need data to handle. And for learning analytics, there are probably three main sources for data. We have the learning management systems like Educen Playground or Moodle or Blackboard or whatever you're using in your school or in your education, which are really great sources for learning analytics. And one of the reasons for that is that they usually collect the data automatically, and they collect a lot of data automatically. And we can get really detailed data on what's happening. If the students are working on exercises, we can typically from LMS, learning management system, we can get data like when the students started the exercise and how many points they collected, and how they set their time, where they spent most of their time when they were doing the exercises, and things like that, which are really useful when we start actually analyzing the data. And then if we go to a bit lower level, there's the registry data, where we can get stuff like grades on timetables and registrations to courses and things like that, which is again important. It isn't as detailed as the data we get from learning management systems, but it's still useful, and it can give us an overview or a bigger picture of something. So we can, for example, compare classes or compare different years against each other, and we can look at the trends in a larger scale. So what's happening from 1 week to another, or from 1 month to another, or from 1 year to another, and things like that. And it's also great if we're doing changes in our education, in our teaching, to see if those changes are actually effective or not. And then there's the other data. There's different kind of statistics which we can apply. I mean by statistics, stuff like we can collect with surveys, for example, which are useful. And then there's also what I think is actually quite interesting thing are the sensors, different kind of sensors we can use to measure different kind of variables in education or in teaching in classroom, things like a noise level, or the quality of the breathing air, or things like that. And then there are also personal sensors, and we've been experimenting, for example, in University of Turku, we've been experimenting with these mood rings, which actually measure the stress level of students. So when the student wears a ring, then we can get data, continuous data on how their stress level changes. And when we know what they've been working on, then we can isolate things that cause more stress, and try to get rid of things that cause more stress, and try to focus on things that don't cause as much stress. So a lot of possibilities. And of course, the most fruitful scenarios are the ones where we can combine the data from different sources. So if we have the registry data and we have the LMS data, and we maybe have sensors, and then we can combine the data from all those sources, that's where we can really start analyzing things. About the process, how any analytics process goes, we start with capturing the data, and then we move on to analyzing and reporting the results. and then we need to find out what we mean by those results. And now when we think about the process, it's actually rather typical that there's a single teacher working on the process, or there might be researchers involved. So this whole process can be done by a single person, or there might be several persons involved in the process. But anyway, after we analyzed and reported the results, we need to interpret them. So to find or try to get to point, what does it mean? So if we see that there's a student who gets less points than another student, what does that mean? Or students who are spending less time on some of the exercises, what does that mean? Or if there are changes in noise level or whatever the data to sensors is giving us, what could that mean, and how could that affect the whole learning situation? And then probably probably the most difficult part, at least on my opinion, is the number 4, the acting part, the one where we have the results, we have interpreted the results, so we think we have an understanding on what the results mean, and then we need to be able to act according to those results. And it could be simple. It can seem simple. We can have dates showing us that there's a student who's getting lower grades than he or she used to get before, and then we could try to offer assistance or something like that, but then there are scenarios which are really difficult to act on. And the problem with the stage number 4, the acting, is that if we're doing something wrong, if we're acting wrong, or if we decide not to act on whatever results we might be having, it's possible that we make the situation a lot worse than it was before. And then the final step, like in any process, is the refine step, where we see what we did before and we try to improve the process, and then we start over. And typically this is a cycle, the whole process. So it's also typical that it's also continuous and the different stages are overlapping. So we keep on capturing the data while we are analyzing it and interpreting and acting on it and so on. And there are several challenges connected to all of those steps. And let's not go through all of these in detail. But if you think about capturing, we need to decide how we're going to do it, what kind of data we want to capture, and there might be some security and ethical issues over there, like where we can store the data, who will have access to data, and so on. And when we have the data, we move to analysis and reporting, and again, we need to decide how to analyze it and to whom are we reporting the results. And this also changes or might affect how to report the data, how we're going to visualize the data. And we're probably going to have different reports. If you have the same data and we're reporting it to students or teachers or principals or school leaders or anyone like that, we probably want to visualize it a little bit differently, and we want to emphasize different points based on who we're reporting the data to, and so on. And then the interpretation part, which is again sort of difficult. How to ensure that we are actually interpreting it correctly? Are we actually understanding what's happening in the data? Do we actually know what the results mean, or are we just guessing that this might mean something like this? Again, this is a difficult part. And then the acting, which I mentioned before, who should act? So if, again, as an example, if we have a result stating that a student is getting a lot less points from exercises than he or she used to get in previous classes, who should act? It's probably the teacher, but when and how and so on. And then I think it's important that if we're acting according to results, we should also see if it works. So we should measure the effect and see if it's actually useful. Did we actually do something useful, or did the situation get worse or stay the same? And whenever we talk about learning analytics, I'm going to go into examples in a minute. So this is all a bit abstract, but if you talk about learning analytics, or again, any data analytics, we usually isolate 4 levels of analytics. And typically the analytics we are doing are in the first level, the descriptive level of analytics, where we see what has happened. So we look at the data and look at the data we have collected and try to answer questions like what went well and what went wrong and things like that. And on the second level, on the diagnostic level, we go a bit more into details. We try to find out why the things happen. So if we get from the first level, if we get results stating that things went really well, in the second level, we may try to find out why did the results improve? Why did the students spend more time doing the exercises, or why did they get more points from the exercises, or why are the grade levels going up? Or the same if something is going wrong, so why are the grade levels going down, or why are there students missing the classes, more students missing the classes than usual, or things like that. So level 2 usually tries to deepen our understanding of what's happening in the first level, in the descriptive level of analysis, or from the data or knowledge acquired in the first level. Then the third one is more difficult and usually more difficult analysis to perform, because in the third level we're trying to predict what will happen next, and it's usually again based on the analysis we did in the first two levels. And I'm going to show an example this in a minute. And then the final one is probably the most advanced level of analytics, and the final one, the prescriptive level. In the prescriptive analytics, we try to come up with reasoning for what should we do about this. What are the kind of things we should perform to improve the situation, or get better results, or whatever we're trying to achieve. And on the bottom of the slide, there's a typical approach to learning analytics. So we have a data, we analyze it, and then we try to come up with a general model, and this model can be actually used in the third level as well. So if we have done the descriptive and diagnostic analysis, then we can try to predict based on the model what's going to happen next. So let's see some examples. What do I actually mean about learning analytics, and what are the actual applications? What kind of data we can analyze, and what we can understand, what kind of understanding we can gain from analyzing the data. So let's start with the data to model concept, which I mentioned there before, which is our basic approach to learning analytics. We collect a lot of data, then we analyze the data, and when we have enough data from enough iterations, it could be from several courses, or from several years of teaching the same class, or from several years of teaching the same grade of classes, then we can try to come up with a model. And the whole idea of the model is that we can then use that model to predict what's going to happen before it has happened, which I think is this is what the analytics can do when it's when we get to sort of a higher level. And here's an example. It's a course where we have a bunch of students, and this sort of visualizes the idea. On the right hand side, there's what's the situation, what's happening on the course at the end of week 2. This is an 8-week course, and on the left hand side is the week 8. Is what's happening on week 8. And now all these dots on these visualizations, excuse me, they all represent a single student, and they are color coded based on how they had achieved in the course. What was their final grade? And in this case, we're mainly interested in the students who failed to pass the course. And the red color indicates that the student didn't pass the course. So if you look at the week 8, and this is the situation at the end of the course. So we see that there are a bunch of red students here on the lower left corner, and these are the students who did not get an acceptable grade. And what's happening in this figure itself is that we have the total points collected in the y-axis, and we have the number of tasks completed in the x-axis over here. So the students basically start from the bottom left corner, and then they try to move towards the upper right corner, which is like the target at the end of the course. But what's the model thing here is that what we mean by the model here is that when we completed the same course several times, and we've had enough students in that course, in each year of that course, or whenever, however often we do iterate the course, we can try to come up with one model which we can use to reliably predict student success, for example, at the second week. So we don't need to wait until the end of the course, because if you look at what's happening at the end of the course, we don't really need advanced analytics. We can just take a look at what are the final grades. But if we can come up with a reliable model, then we can sort of reliably predict what's going to happen already in week 2. And this is a huge advantage, because this means that we can react when we still have time. We can see that, okay, there are a number of students here in this model displayed in week 2 which are already red, and it seems that if these students keep on collecting points and completing tasks like they've been doing so far, they are probably not going to pass this course. And this means that we can then assist them. We can see if they are not understanding something, if they need like easier exercises or any additional assistance or anything like that. And the great thing is that there's still a lot of time to help them. But if we see that there are problems at the end of the course, then there's really nothing we can do. We can maybe ask them to take the course again, but that's not really a solution with what we're looking for. And we've been using models like this in university courses, for example, and we've gone up to, I think the reliability level has been more than 80 in predicting the student success at the end of week 2, which I think is quite okay. Okay, connected to this, another important thing, and a lot of times when we're talking about learning analytics, we talk about student performance. We talk about things like grades the students are getting, and how many points they are collecting from exercises, and how much homework they are doing. But a thing that really connected to students' performance, but that isn't mentioned that as often, is student well-being. And we have a lot of useful tools we can use to measure the student well-being as well. I mentioned the mood rings there earlier, but something simpler like surveys, for example, can be really useful. And here's an example of a survey we've been doing with university students. But that's not really important. The level of education isn't really important in any of these examples. But basically, the idea is that this is sort of a study habit survey, which means that we are asking questions that are connected to education, but not to formal education. So we don't ask them how often they participate in the lectures or how much time they spend on their homework, but instead we ask them things like how many hours do they sleep at night, or things like that, which can have a direct effect on their learning, but which are not connected to the formal education. And the answers to individual questions are interesting, but when we combine several questions, or when we combine the answers to several questions, it becomes even more interesting. And here's an example. We had 2 questions in a survey. The first one is, I have friends who I can work with outside school. And the second one is, I often feel myself as mentally or physically tired. And both of these questions alone provide us valuable information about what's happening and what's happening, or about things that are connected to learning. But if we combine the answers, I think it's even more interesting. So if we look at the graph over here, we can see that the students who report having friends who they can work with outside school also report that they are less mentally and physically tired, which is sort of logical, but still important. It's what it seems is that if the students don't need to work alone on all the tasks, if they have friends who they can work with on school tasks, whatever those tasks may be, they are less tired, so they are probably doing better in school as well. They can perform better, and So the well-being is directly connected to the performance in this case as well. And when we have a bunch of these questions, we can come up with graphs like this on the right-hand side, where we display the connections between individual questions with these lines in the graph. And a green line indicates that there's a positive correlation, and the red line indicates a negative correlation. But anyway, and then the width of the line indicates how strong the correlation is. So if there's a really strong red line between two dots, it indicates that there's a strong positive correlation between those questions. So there's been a number of questions in our survey. We're just displaying two on this left-hand side. Another important thing about this one, I think, is that, okay, we get the information. So students say that if they have friends who they can work with, they are less tired, both mentally and physically. So how to act? If you think about the process of learning analytics, we have the data, we have analyzed the data, and now we have reported the data to someone, for example, the teacher or student counselor or anything like that. So what can we do? We can't really force students to have any friends. So I think it's also an example of how we can find out there are problems, how our analysis can detect problems, but then fixing those problems might be difficult. In university, we tried, when we get the data, for example, for this one, we tried different things. We, for example, tried to provide some means for students to spend some time together at free time, like if they wanted to go bowling with some friends, then the university paid them a small fee, so they didn't need to pay for themselves or things like that. So you probably need to be creative when you're solving difficult problems. But there are, again, I want to emphasize, there are definitely some problems you're going to find out with learning analytics which you probably can't solve yourself, which can be frustrating, but that's just how it goes. The final example I want to show you is about analyzing your own teaching process. And again, there are two courses I have been giving myself, or I have been involved in teaching these courses. And the first one is in junior high, the second one is at university. And the content of the courses was quite similar. They are both introductory programming courses with Python programming language. And they are both meant for people who have no previous experience in programming. And the junior high course was probably a little bit easier than the university course, but the basic idea was the same. We start from the zero level of experience, and we try to teach them some really basic programming in 8 weeks or 16 weeks or something like that. And what we have visualized in these two graphs is the time slots for each week. So from Monday to Sunday, and then we have divided it in the slots of 3 hours. And the numbers here indicate the amount of exercises the students been doing during those times. So what it means, if you look at the junior high graph, you can see that the students are working on Mondays between 9 and 12 mostly. And this is due to the fact that the lessons were on Monday from 9 to 12 or from 8 to 12, but basically during that time anyway. And that's when almost all of the work is done during the junior high course. They're not really doing anything outside that time. They're not really doing any homework or anything additional at night. So they're basically just doing, and they're doing actually a lot of work, but all the work is done during that times. And if you take a look at the university graph, you can see that it's the amount of work is spread evenly throughout the week. So they are working each day, and there are some days when they are doing more exercises. There are probably again reasons like deadlines or something like that, but still they are working throughout the week each day and at all times. And how is this connected to teaching process is the fact that if I'm designing a course for junior high and for university, and we're talking about sort of similar course with sort of similar content, I probably need to create a different kind of course utilizing different kind of learning methods to junior high, because they are mostly working, or they are almost only working when they have the teaching in the classroom. So I need to try to prepare a course which works as well as possible, even if the students only work during the class hours. But for the university, I can design a different kind of course where the students themselves have more responsibility in completing the exercises, and I can sort of rely on the fact that the work is spread evenly throughout the week. So this information, so it's simple information and it's a simple analysis, but it's still really useful because it gives me a lot of information on how to design better courses for different people, different audiences. Now, educational technology is, and as I mentioned, LMSs, learning management systems, is usually connected to analytics quite deeply. And if you think about a typical approach is that we have some kind of artificial intelligence engine, and artificial might mean anything for something really simple to something really advanced. Let's talk about this a bit more later. Anyway, we have some kind of engine that's collecting usage data by students. So collecting data, for example, on exercises completed and the scores achieved and the time spent on those exercises and things like that. And then it provides some analytics or some reporting to students, some feedback, and some personalized challenge maybe based on what they've been doing before, and so on. And then it provides different kind of analytics to teachers, like the learning data and performance insight and support for differentiation and so on. And for this process to be effective, it needs to be as automatic as possible. But this is like the basic scenario. And if you think about automated analytics, they can be really useful, and it's possible to come up with information that's sort of difficult to achieve by any other means, or at least it takes a lot of work to achieve it. And this is now an example from Educen Playground. And the idea of this one is that we have all the students. This is from mathematics lesson. Again, it's not important whether it's about mathematics, but the whole concept. So it's a mathematics analytics or learning analytics connected to mathematics learning. And now there are a bunch of mathematics or math topics in the top row, like calculation in a row and number line and multiplication, addition, and so on. And each row represents the performance of a single student. And now the colors indicate the student's performance on that topic. And the whole idea of this view is that it's a real time, so the teacher can open the view anytime and check what's going on. And then the colors indicate different kind of need for each student. So a red color indicates that there's a problem. The student is having a problem with that topic. And it's not connected to any single exercise or any single lesson or anything like that, but it's like a general observation that, for example, the fifth student from the top is having problems with the concept of calculation in a row. And this is based on the fact that the students are working on a lot of exercises, and the engine collects all the data from all those exercises and then isolates exercises and questions and assignments that are connected to specific topics, and then it learns to predict the performance of students over time. So the more exercises and assignments the students take, more reliable is this view about their performance. And why it's so useful is the whole fact that it is real time. So the teacher doesn't need to give specific test or anything like that to see if the students know how to do multiplication. Instead, the teacher can open this view and see which of the students are having problems with the topics, or on the other hand, which of the students are doing really well with some of the topics, which may also require some acting, because we all know that if you know the thing you're working on too well, if the thing is too easy, then that might have an effect on your motivation. It's not nice to work on something that's too easy either. Okay, I mentioned artificial intelligence before, and I think it's something we should discuss, especially because there are a lot of parties over there who sort of advertise that they have artificial intelligence system connected and they have adaptive systems connected to their educational technology and their learning management system or their exercise systems or anything like that. And I think honestly, in a lot of occasions, the term artificial intelligence is used way too loosely. A lot of the systems are actually really simple. So the actual artificial intelligence can definitely be useful in learning analytics. And let's talk about that a bit more at the end of this presentation when I want to discuss how I see the future of learning analytics. But a lot of things advertised as an artificial intelligence are really actually not that, but are something way more simple. They can still be useful, but the whole term is used quite loosely. But if you look at a figure like this or analytics like this is again an example where there is some actual artificial intelligence connected over there. So the system actually learns how to predict things based on the exercises, and it's not just something as simple as uh, calculating a value based on some answers or something like that. So again, what I want you to see is want to say is sort of be it's okay to not agree or not believe everything you hear about AI in learning analytics. But let's talk about the future. Let's conclude this presentation or webinar by talking about the future of learning analytics, because that's definitely where the artificial intelligence and machine learning and concepts like that needs to be connected, because that's something that's needed to actually go to the next level of learning analytics. And one of the things I'm really looking for is personalized support from all these systems. And what we're having now are we have systems that sort of say that they adapt to students' needs and so on, but the actual mechanisms are quite simple, and we don't really see any real adaptation. We have systems that can, for example, analyze how well the students are doing in some kind of exercises, for example, in if we talk about mathematics, like multiplication exercises, and then if it seems that the student is not getting enough points, then they can provide easier exercises, which I think it's fine. But learning is holistic. There's a lot of things happening in learning. It's not about performance only. And if we want to have really personalized support, we should have a system that actually takes account holistically all the things that are affecting learning preferences and mindset and things like that, and then adapts precisely to that kind of learning style or learning preferences. Or and it's also true that the same student might have different learning preferences on different topics or different times of day. You may want to work on something different during the daytime and during the evening or things like that. And I really like a good quality system would also understand this and would also adapt to this one. So this is definitely what we are aiming for and where we are going, but we are not there exactly yet. Then soft skills are definitely important. Again, something that's probably not discussed enough. So we're, as I said before, we're easily focused on performance and grades and number of points collected, but soft skills are important and are actually very connected to performance as well. So if you think about psychometrics, for example, things like motivation and mindset and problem solving skills and so on, these are not really analyzed as much in learning analytics at the moment. But again, we are going there slowly. And again, as I said before, this is a useful if we can actually collect this kind of data somewhat automatically and analyze it and utilize it. Again, it means that we can use adaptive decision making. We can provide better exercises, we can provide better teaching, and we can provide better information to teacher and students and to administration. Because as I said before, learning is something that's just not about performance. It's about a lot of things happening, everything happening around you, and everything happening inside your head, and there are a lot of things going on, and they all affect the learning experience. Then I think teachers as a stakeholder or stakeholders is definitely a group we should support better by learning analytics. And nowadays, learning analytics is mostly connected to collecting data from students, which is sort of natural because that's the data that there's a lot of that kind of data available. So we have that great data, and we have data about students' exercises and data about, well, that's what the schools are. Schools are about collecting data from students. But if we really want to improve the teaching process, we should also consider teachers as stakeholders more. So we should probably collect more data on teaching activities, and not just on learning performance, but how the teachers are teaching, what kind of materials they are using, and what is the general flow of a lesson and things like that. And then we can analyze that data and try to provide more information for teacher about his or her own teaching process, which I think is it's really illuminating. Something I try to do as a teacher as much as possible. I try to find out how am I doing, what am I doing wrong, what is working, what kind of materials and exercises and assignments are working, and what kind of are not working, and so on. And again, we have the same goal, same like basic goal. We want to improve the quality of education, but we should probably focus more on the teacher side as well. Again, this is also important, valuable information for school administrators, for principals or school leaders, or anyone to see how the teachers are performing. And teachers' well-being, like all the teachers, is the workload too much? Could we improve the quality of teaching by just maybe, I don't know, sharing the workload better, or chasing the rhythm of a school day or something like that? And then what we're trying to do at the moment is provide support for differentiation, and there are a lot of things we can do, but again, there are a lot of things we could do better as well. And this isn't only about learning analytics, this is also about acting to learning analytics. But I think we should come up with a system where we can enable true adaptation of materials from all levels. And what I mean is that if you have a second grade student who can work on the 8th grade material, then the student should be able to work on the 8th grade material in one topic. And if in another topic he or she is comfortable with the second grade material, then he or she can use the second grade material on that topic. So we should have a flexible system where the student can actually utilize the materials and exercises and whatever from whatever level they are actually at, not tied up or not connected just to the level they are officially, but what's their skill level on the topic, and so on. And for learning analytics, I think one of the important thing here is to connect the analytics from different topics. So if you're collecting data in mathematics, we can probably utilize some of that data to teach science as well, or teach something entirely different, because a lot of things are still common in learning, even if you're learning or teaching different topics. So I have 4 points here of what we are doing in learning analytics now, or in education in general now, and where I think we should aim. So first one, we're now focusing solely on students. And in the future, I think the analytics should focus on all stakeholders, something I just mentioned. So we should focus on teachers, and we should probably focus on school administrators as well, and learn about their decisions as well, and try to analyze the effects of those on learning as well. And the second one is that we have a lot of data, and what I mean by subjective data is that we have a lot of data which which we don't know whether it's reliably actually displays what we think it should display. So and this is actually true for any kind of analytics, and for anything, for any research as well. We try to aim for as objective data as possible. And number 3, we're now focusing on performance. So we're interested in scores and grades, and and so on. We're really interested in numbers, which are important, and which are easy ways to measure something. But the learning experience is actually a holistic thing. As we all know, there are a lot of things connected to learning, and learning experience can be positive even if you're not getting better grades. There can still be things that are useful to you in the future. You can learn stuff that isn't directly connected to your grades as well, and you are learning things like that, and those are all important. And then we should consider the whole learning experience as a something that sort of connected to everything what's happening inside you and outside you. And finally, now where the adaptation is based on exercise completions in most systems, and I think it should be based on various skills, psychometric skills, your mindset and preferences and things like that. So we should have a lot of information, again, holistic information about learning experience, and utilize that experience to come up with learning environments that are as effective and as fun and as nice as possible. I think those are the words we can mention in here. Finally, I want to mention we have a concept called Finland Math, which we've been working on for a couple of years with a lot of skilled researchers and other people, and it's connected to learning analytics as well. So all the things we mentioned, all the basic principles of Finland Math should be connected to a well-designed learning analytics and the analytics support, and should enable these features. I'm not going to go into details on this. If you go to finlandmath.com, you can free of charge download all the guides we've been writing. We have a second part of our learning analytics guide coming up at next month, if I remember correctly. And as I said, you can just go there and you don't need to pay for anything. You can just collect or download all the guides we have there at the moment about Finland Math, and for example, about learning analytics. And finally, some tips for utilizing analytics if you're working on learning analytics, whether it's about utilizing automated analytics provided you by some system, or whether you're actually collecting some data yourself, or something in between. I think there are some important points I've learned, and some of these were sort of difficult to learn, but I think it's important that you bring students as part of the process. So it's not about just collecting data from students and then acting about that. It's about having students to be part of the process. And there are a lot of things we can offer the students based on learning analytics, and we can provide some visualizations for students as well. It's can be quite useful to visualize the progress of the whole class or individual students as well, and make the whole process as transparent as possible. At least this is on my experience. If I start working on analytics with some group, if I start by telling them that I'm going to collect this kind of data, this is how I'm going to analyze it, and this is what I'm going to do with the results. So if I see that this is wrong, I'm going to act like this. It probably usually makes the whole process a lot easier to complete. So explain what you're doing, why you're doing it, when you're doing it, how you're doing it, basic things. And then I mentioned the free guides. So please utilize them. There are, especially on the second part, there are a lot of examples about learning analytics, and then there are a lot of tips on how you can actually utilize the learning analytics, automated analytics in your own teaching, and so on. So thank you very much for listening. There was a lot of things in a tight package, but hopefully you got something out of this one. And if you have any questions, I'm more than you can type them in the WhatsApp. We try to answer them as much as possible. And then there's my email address. I'm more than happy to try to answer any questions you might be, whether it's about this presentation, or if you're interested in collaboration, or if you're interested in automated analytics provided in our systems, or if you're working on something similar yourself, would be great to hear that. Or if you've done any learning analytics, and whether you succeeded or failed, I'm really interested in hearing that. I know that a lot of people around the world are working in a lot of really interesting things, and it's always great to hear about your experiences. So thank you very much for this one, and see you next time.